Hello, and welcome back to the Legal Cheat podcast. My name is Julia Szaniszlo, and I'm joined once again by my lovely fellow writer, Ryan Scott. Hello, Ryan.
Hi everybody.
Hiya. So, today's topic of discussion is, I hope, a little more light-hearted, but we hope as well as helpful as ever. We're going to be talking about interview questions, but not just your run-of-the-mill ones. We've picked some real weird curveballs to discuss today. When you're preparing for your law firm interviews, as I'm sure you all know, you tend to focus on the classics. Why law? Why this firm? Why me? But thanks to some really lovely submissions, some very strange ones from our Instagram, as well as a bit of personal experience and internet sleuthing, we've compiled a list of some rather weird and wacky interview questions that people have been faced with at a law firm interview. We'll run through them today, talk a little bit about why people may be asking you these questions that seem a little bit out of the blue, and how you might approach them. What we really want to drive home is that no matter how much you prepare for an interview, how well you know the firm, how well you know yourself, you will always face quite unexpected circumstances and questions, and that's fine. That's just the nature of the game. So rather than being scared or nervous, we hope that this episode will calm you a little bit and perhaps help you approach these questions in a way which is composed, chilled out, and not too stressed. So, We've I've ordered these questions, Ryan, in a way which hopefully goes from most normal, most run of the mill
Mm,
to really a bit weird and quite
Bizarre.
rare, quite rare. Some of these are questions that are actually quite typical and get asked quite often, but might stump you because they're not phrased in a way which is quite normal, and others are entirely outlandish. Our first one, which I actually think I got asked recently in an interview, was how would you pitch this firm's expertise to a client? Ryan, you were also asked this in an interview, I think, right?
I was indeed. It's one of those ones where you can somewhat expect it, but if you haven't prepared for it well, or you don't have like a little bit of an answer in mind, it can really throw you on the spot to be like, oh, how am I going to come up with a pitch right here? I think there's some general things you can say and some more specific things. So I'd always, if you're going for a city firm, they're probably going to have international expertise. They're probably going to have offices all over the world. So you could start with, well, we have local expertise and teams on the ground throughout the world. Depending on the client, they're probably going to be a global client, a multinational client. So that's definitely going to help with whatever they're kind of dealing with. Um, you can also go to highlight the firm's track record on similar matters. Obviously, I don't know what the content of the kind of discussion will have been before that, but you can highlight any rankings they have or any notable cases you're aware of in specific practice areas. And then maybe perhaps you can explain why the firm aligns with a client's goals and ambitions. You could say something like the combined legal knowledge with deep sector expertise and a practical commercial approach. That's all quite airy and fluffy. So I think you've got to maybe tie that in with some of the specialties of the firm. So, for example, one of the unique things I know CMS does, it might other firms might do it too. It's part of their tagline that they're law, tax, and future. Perhaps whatever the discussion entails and whatever their client needs, they might need some tax advice with it too. Other firms might not be able to offer tax or like accountancy advice like CMS might be able to. Same with Ashurst. They do Ashurst Advance. I know a lot of firms have these kind of like legal consulting divisions now. If the thing the client wants help with is particularly tech heavy or could use with some like AI solutions, perhaps Ashurst could employ its Ashurst Advanced Consulting division to help come up with a solution that really helps the client. Those are the things I would cover. Is there anything else that you might have mentioned during yours, Julia?
Yeah, I think understanding a firm's practice area specialties and how each of those
Mm,
practice areas interact with both their client base and each other is really important. For instance, with a firm like Ropes and Gray, we all know that the bread and butter of their entire firm is going to be private equity, and they've named it in lots of events that I've been to and sort of things that I've interacted with them with as their core. So you're going to want to make sure to know that sort of thing. What this question is doing is asking you to talk about the firm in a way which isn't just, oh, why do you want to train here? But why do you think you want to work here? And why do you think we'd be good at why do you think we're good at what we do? So they don't want to hear for, like a why this firm question is always, oh, you have a really good training contract seat, maybe like Farrer and Co, for instance, you've got 6 seats instead of four. That's really cool. I'd like that. They're asking you to really dig deep into their services and what they actually do. You could talk about the fact that, I don't know, I have a lot of experience with Wiles, so obviously they're uniquely placed because they have their restructuring practice and they also have their PE and funds practice. That's really well balanced if a client needs both those sort of services at once. They have both ends of two rather, difficult processes that a company might have to go through. For Travis Smith, they've got their international best friend approach. That's really unique. So for a client, you could tell them, well, we can provide you excellent services here in the UK, but what we have is an incredible network across the world, not just of our lawyers, not really of our lawyers at all, but of the best local counsel that you could possibly get because we build our relationships with them for you in a way. And that's a really unique offering for a client. Think about it from their perspective. So you can't just you can't fall into that normal trap of answering a why this firm question by talking about yourself. You have to talk about them. It's quite a self-centered question, as is the case with lots of law firm interviews. But yeah, I think, have I missed anything?
I like what you say there though about what it's actually assessing. It's how does this firm make money and how do we win over clients? Because that's something ultimately that you're going to have to kind of learn the way when you move up the food chain in a firm. Like obviously you got to win over business when you're a partner or a senior associate, something like that. So it's a bit more interesting than a why law question. I think it really shows your understanding of what the firm actually does and that this firm a law firm is there to make money at the end of the day. It is a business. But no, I think you covered everything there. My answer was very, very fluffy. If you run out of things to do, I'd just be like, international approach, perhaps.
Yeah.
But just moving on to the next one we've got, it's tell us why, despite not having done any work experience with the firm, you chose to apply here. I actually only applied for direct training contracts during my last application cycle. So I didn't have any vacation schemes under my belt. I had done some work experience with a local firm in my hometown, but it was kind of nothing of the sort of like a city firm, anything like that. It was more just kind of a simple 2 week long thing. But just how would I answer that question? It's a difficult one. I think it's just an opportunity to showcase your research of the firm. You can say like I've networked with lawyers there. You've been to events or webinars or open days or careers fair, and I've met the early talent team or obviously met trainees there. You've listened to podcasts or talks we've done. You've seen deals or things in the news. I think it's an opportunity to explain how you've done your research or what research you've got on them and how it relates to your motivations for applying for the firm. I think for me, I would have said that for everywhere I applied to, I pretty much attended an open day or webinar with them. Spoke to some people after the event, spoke to as many people as possible, got their names down and kind of like jotted down notes of what they've said, anything specific about this firm. Maybe talk about the investment in training and development that they told me about. So some firms offer secondments or they offer kind of like secondments when you're an associate as well, things like that. Um, and then maybe contrast it to what you like at this firm compared to competitors and what it does differently and why it's attracted you there. It kind of really highlights that you know the difference between firms and you're not just applying for the sake like a scattergun approach. You are being specific with how you're applying, even though you haven't done work experience at the firm. Julie, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that basically covers it off. It's essentially just an opportunity to show that you've interacted with them. And that's one of the key things I would say to anyone going into the next application cycle as this one sort of slows down slightly. Obviously, it's not completely over. But whatever you do, make sure that every firm you've applied to, you have had some form of interaction with them. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be an open day because those can be competitive. Obviously, apply for those, they're great, and they're really the best insight that you can have. But have something to say for this sort of question for every single firm where you can say, oh, I spoke to this person, I interacted with them here, 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 because they don't just want to know that you've, read their webpage. We've talked about this extensively in our How to Research a Firm podcast episode a few weeks ago, month ago. So yeah, it's not a drawback to not have done work experience at this firm. This is just phrased in a rather mean way. It's like,
Yeah.
why are you applying here? And I think that's what might throw people off. So don't let it. That's all it's asking you to do. Even though it can be difficult, I always think the best thing to do is to try and find out what the logic behind an interview question is, because then it makes it a lot less scary. They're not trying to
Yeah.
throw you, or maybe they are, but at the end of the day, it's just trying to figure out why you want to even work there. But I think, yeah, you answered it perfectly. I think the next one was something that you were asked as well. If I had been asked this, I would have absolutely frozen up. What would you do if a client asked you to do something ethically dubious? And then what was the caveat that someone said to you, like that clients are first or something like that?
Yeah, it was to do with there was also something worded in there about always prioritizing exceptional client service where whilst being asked to do something ethically dubious. It was something along those lines. And you say if you was asked that you would freeze up. I was nearly on the verge of tears. I had no idea what to answer. I sat there, I was like, oh, can I just have a second to think? Took a long sip of water and just kind of gathered my thoughts, organized what I was going to say. It was a difficult one, but I don't think I answered it the most eloquently at the time, but I do think, as you mentioned earlier, that one of the things to in these interview questions that are curveballs is to show that you can kind of stay calm, stay gathered and present, and organize your thoughts and come up with a coherent answer. I think in hindsight, I'd say something along the lines of, um, as a commercial solicitor, it's always important to prioritize exceptional client service. However, as part of that, it's necessary to follow the principles laid down by the SRA. It protects us, not only us, but also the client from both suit and also reputational damage. And then also mention actual like a pragmatic approach. If I had concerns about what the client had asked me to do, I would immediately relay those concerns to a supervisor or a superior, whether that's a senior associate or say the anti-money laundering officer at a firm or the compliance officer at a firm. And in the meantime, I send a holding email to the client in response whilst I figure out what to do, so as to A, not tip them off that I can't do the work that they're asking me to do, and B, still prioritize that exceptional client service of going back to them immediately whenever they email me. Um, but it's a difficult one because you don't want to. It's one with like a lot of if, ands, or buts. You don't want to give a certain answer like, "Oh yeah, I'd totally do it," or "Oh, I totally wouldn't do it." It's like don't tip off the client, give them a holding email, but I'd speak to someone and ask for their advice who's more experienced than me. Would you do anything different there?
No, not at all. I think the important thing to highlight here is that even if you have to prioritize client needs and client wants at all, sort of at all costs, the important thing to bear in mind is that I think you mentioned this previously, it would be damaging to the client ultimately if you did go through with it, because there would be probably something that some sort, we don't know what it was in particular that they would
Mm,
have been doing, but they might have been caught up in a scandal. They might have harmed people, and that is going to, as cynical as it sounds, have commercial backlash, and it would commercially damage you as a firm, and then your firm would not be able to provide that excellent client service to all of the other clients that you have. So you'd
mm,
be, obviously that's a very dramatic version of events, and I also would probably answer this extremely badly. Well, you, I think with a question like this, you just have to, yeah, as Ryan did, take it slow, speak slowly,
mm.
don't blurt things out. I think when I was stuck on questions in my interviews, I just sort of just breathed, calmed down, just water off a duck's back. It's fine.
I I think one thing in relation to that you do say is you can ask them to repeat a question
Oh
and
yeah.
also for clarification as well, for sure. Like I did that a lot in my interview when he asked a particularly confusing or like I would say long-winded question, just a long question where there's a lot of elements to it. I'd be like, just remind me of that second part you said or something like that. And
Yeah.
especially when it's just like a difficult one you need to think about, it's okay to ask them to repeat it. I think I definitely did for this one.
Yeah, I fully said I wasn't sure about something. So
Mm.
don't do that maybe. It worked out, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
I think in our list, I might have missed one off that I didn't send over to you, but do you want to still do it? What would you do if you committed to work for a senior associate, but a partner told
Mm.
you last minute to do different work for a different deadline? So this is sort of situational, kind of like the question you might see in an SJT. And I think this is just another question that it really matters how you answer it, because it really obviously depends on the custom situation. But it, first of all, never feel like you are alone as a junior lawyer. You'd probably have a supervisor that you're answering to, and you'd be able to ask them for help on this. Also, if you've committed to work for the senior associate, then you've committed to work for them. That doesn't mean you can just backtrack and decide, oh, I'm not going to get this done for them because a partner is more senior to them, so I want to impress them. There's no point in doing that either. You need to stick by the things that you say that you'll do. I think that's really important, being showing integrity, but also showing that you can stretch yourself. So you could say that I would talk to my supervisor, I would sort of look at my capacity, see if I was able to contribute in any meaningful way. And then I would maybe talk to the partner about how much I could contribute. I wouldn't commit, how would I say? I wouldn't commit fully with no sort of consideration first.
Mm.
And that's fine. Um, I find these sorts of questions very, very difficult to answer in a vacuum because they are so contextual. What if you knew the partner very well? What if you didn't know them at all and it was completely out the blue? Depends on what kind of work it was, depends on what kind of week you were having. But if you sort of show that you're taking all of those things into consideration, I think it's fine. But don't just fob off your senior associate, I think is the big don't do that in this case. How would you answer it, Ryan?
I agree with you there. I think it is like a situational judgment test question. I would expect to see that. It's very kind of, I think it assesses how pragmatic you can be. So I'd just say, obviously, as you said, there's a lot of unknowns as well. How close are you with the senior associate and the partner, and kind of what are the expectations there? But I mean, one of the things you can say for certain is that you should communicate clearly and communicate expectations and kind of timelines with both the people. So if you've already been asked by a senior associate and the partner's now asking you to do work, obviously you can just say to the partner, well, I do have this deadline to do by X date as well. You don't have to turn down the work. You can just make them aware of that. And then I'll probably go speak to the senior associate because the partner might take priority there. Communicate the new deadline you've got. And you never know, he might tell you that perhaps there's an option. It's a soft deadline they've got, and perhaps they can extend the deadline for you, or perhaps they can find someone else to reallocate the work to. Or I think in some firms as well, obviously you'll have paralegals there, and trainees do actually have the options sometimes to delegate work to paralegals. So if it's kind of routine work that they might be able to do, then you might be able to delegate that work on someone else. I think it's worth considering all of your options before committing to anything. Um, and also, as you say, like pushing yourself as well. One of the ideas that I think, and it always comes up in a situational judgment test, I find it asks you to like rank responses. One of them is, I will stay back all night and do the work. I think that is something you can like incorporate in there, but like, I will try and stay behind and complete the work no matter what. But sometimes it's just physically impossible. But once again, with this type of question, they haven't given you enough information to be able to tell, is it or isn't it possible? So just cover all the bases, I guess.
Yeah. Also, a lot of law firms probably actually don't want you to stay until like 1 in the morning if you're a vac schemer in particular, if they might be asking you in the context of that. Um, I was watching that show Industry recently, and in the first episode, that one, oh, so sad. That one, obviously, this is at not a
Mm.
law firm, but he stays behind extremely, extremely late, and his supervisor tells him, no, go home, get out of here. This is unnecessary. And I'm not saying you won't be working late as a lawyer, as a solicitor, as a trainee, but no one's expecting you to push yourself to the point of breaking. And if they are, then refer them to the SRA indeed. But speaking of resilience, the next question is working in law often requires resilience in the face of difficult situations or setbacks. Could you provide an example of a challenging situation, either academic or personal, that tested your resilience and how you managed it? I've seen this on forms. I've also heard this in interviews, sorry, application forms. Um, I think my question with these is always, what do you mean by personal? Because there are certain things that I wouldn't personally bring up in a law firm interview, or I'm not sure
Mm.
if I should, or would be comfortable with, that are very personal experiences of mine that I know I have really tested my resilience. And I think I've dealt with them admirably, but I wouldn't bring those up necessarily. I think what they're trying to see here is not how much you've suffered. If you haven't suffered particular hardship in your life, don't suddenly go, oh Christ, what am I going to do? They're just trying to understand whether or not you've dealt with challenges effectively and whether you're able to sort of move through sort of stressful situations without completely crumbling. I think the example that I would potentially use was either when I was at university, I managed like almost full-time work for a period during like my final year, and I found that incredibly stressful, but I needed to do that for reasons, and so managing that was a lot for me. So I'd probably talk about that. Or maybe I moved to a brand new country as part of my year abroad. So there's a certain kind of resilience needed when you're dealing with a completely different culture, language, and how you overcome that and how you need to show initiative in overcoming that. I think that's an important part of this question is that you don't sit and let things wash over you, but you sort of take action and try deal with them. Um, yeah, or you could talk about exam periods of, or sort of maybe you really struggled in your first year and you really did very, very well in your second because you sort of pulled yourself together despite something. I think it's always a matter of just what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable talking about very, very personal things, perhaps a relative dealing with an illness and you dealing with that, for instance, then that's fine as well. It's just a matter of framing it in a way that doesn't sound very, woe is me. I don't know. I find this question really difficult to interact with. How
I
would you deal with
agree with
this?
you. Yeah, I agree. I think even we say like interviewers are human too, which they definitely are, and most of them will actually be really, really nice people. I think there's still got to be somewhat of a barrier there in terms of like telling a complete, like a really, really personal story. Like I think it can kind of take you out of the interview a little bit. Not like take you out as in like, oh, well, you haven't got the job anymore. It kind of takes you out of like the professionalness a little bit of the situation. I think they're asking you more so to articulate like the the situation that was difficult and then how you overcame it. And I think sometimes adding some, you can rescind some of those like unnecessary details that make it a bit too personal or
Yeah,
emotional. I think one I used was, I didn't usually say like academic, personal, or extracurricular. I count personal as like my actual work life too. So like,
yeah,
I talked about my work as a paralegal, and I always use the STAR method for this. I think the STAR method is tried and tested. Works well every time. Situation, task, action, result, I believe it is.
yep,
Um, so the situation was I was a insolvency litigation paralegal. Company went insolvent. The liquidator then tries to sell company property as they do. They sell everything the company earns to raise some money and pay back the creditors. But the directors allege that they bought the property in a personal capacity. Because of the nature of companies, if you buy something in a personal capacity, we can't go sell it and pay back the company's creditors. Um, so that basically stumped us. We had no money, we had nothing to sell. We didn't believe them, and I was given thousands of liquidation documents to look through, and I had to basically find something called a trust deed. The trust deed would say that even though the directors bought it in their personal capacity, it was kind of bought on behalf of the company, and that means we can sell it. There was no trust deed. This is the setback. There was no trust deed, so it was like, oh God, we're stumped. What can we do? How can we sell this? So I went through with my own initiative and tabbed all the documents that would indicate the property was actually owned beneficially by the company. So perhaps the company paying up any rent or kind of mortgage payments, or the company dealing with kind of like any maintenance payments, like dealing with the sewers and like the drains and stuff like that. Any documents that said this is owned for the company or showed that it was like bought for the purposes of housing the company's staff or something along those lines. Tabbed all that, got it all together, showed my boss, and was like, "This looks like that it was bought on behalf of the company." And then we wrote a very convincing claim form that basically brought them to the table. So the situation was, couldn't find the trust deed, but found a way around it. Stayed resilient, looked through thousands of documents on my own initiative. That's kind of how I went through it. I do think, as you said, there are some personal circumstances you can talk about, but I think sometimes try and avoid kind of like the too much personal detail because it can just seem, as you say, woe. There's not really a nice way to put it, but sometimes it can be woe is me in an
yeah.
interview, which I don't think interviewers want to hear.
And it's not fun to talk about either.
No.
I in an interview I got asked, oh, so this is separate, but why not like family law, for instance? And
Mm.
my personal response is, having dealt with difficult family situations, I would not
Mm.
want to deal with that professionally. But I did not know. I was sitting there in the interviews, like saying to myself, how do I say that without sounding incredibly self-pitying? I think I ended up just saying it very, very like flatly and just said,
Yes,
given the fact that this is something I have dealt with personally, wouldn't want to mix into my professional life, but I gave no further detail, and they just sort of went, okay,
that's
thank
it. It
you.
adds a heaviness to the room that kind of like
I was like,
you want to leave an
oh,
interview on a very positive and smiling note, I think, so they remember you. And if it leaves a heaviness in the room, it's kind of a damper on it.
it was a real damper. I clawed it back. We got back on track, but yeah, it was not fun. Speaking of negativity, next question is another classic that I don't hear talked about in law firm interviews. That's why I've included it
Mm.
here, or we've included it here. Is what's your biggest weakness and why? This is
Mm.
another balancing act question where you neither want to sound like a self-aggrandizing um, insert expletive here. But you also don't want to be overly honest and basically paint a unnecessarily dark picture of your internal psyche. So you don't want to say, I'm a perfectionist. Ha ha ha. No, no one believes that
They
anymore.
hate that one.
They
They
hate it
hate
because
that.
it's repeated to the point of cliche.
Mm.
Also, being too much of a perfectionist, I doubt that's much of a problem in law. Jokes, no, I'm sure. Um, what they want to see is that maybe you've taken steps to actually deal with it. So
Mm.
I would say, for instance, I had a lack of confidence in my public speaking when I was at the beginning of my time at university, and I would get very anxious, I'd get shaky, and I wouldn't like my hands would shake to the point of not being able to hold my voice straight. And I started doing speaking at our like college chapel as practice. It wasn't like public speaking that I needed to read speeches out, actually write my own speeches, but I would read things out loud during services. And that really helped me deal with it. And it's still a thing that I find really quite nerve-wracking. But given the fact that I'm reading here for this podcast, speaking here, it's clearly something I've dealt with. So they want to
Yeah.
see progression rather than you going, um, yeah, I can't think of something. Rather you
I'm
just
too I'm too attentive for my own good.
yeah, no one wants to hear that. And I think that for me, I would pitch it as lack of confidence and then talk about the speaking as an example. That's how I would do it. I don't know if that's the best approach. Well, how would you approach it, Ryan?
I have a similar one to you. I think it's all about showing a little bit of humility and admitting something you struggle with, but carrying that kind of arc through of how you've actually planned to combat this weakness or how you've gone about developing yourself in this way. So mine would have been rambling or kind of
Yeah.
clarity of speech and eloquence, so kind of similar to yours. Like, but I think I would then say, how have I improved this? Well, we're literally recording a podcast. We do webinars as part of the job. We also do interviews as part of the job. And part of that also means adapting our presentation styles based on kind of the medium we're doing. So I have a kind of like interviews very short and snappy. Podcasts is long form content where we're speaking back and forth and have to have this chemistry. And webinars, it's kind of like there's 1,000 people watching you at the time and you've got to engage them. So I think it's having all these kind of presentation styles you've got to have and tailoring it depending on your audience. Um, and just knowing kind of when to cut yourself off, knowing when you're rambling, get back on track, etc. So I think that would be how I would answer. It's very similar to you, and I feel like it's a decent answer, I'd say, because you are highlighting that yeah, it's a weakness, and quite a lot of people struggle with it, and then but you're also discussing how you've tackled that rather than just have a pitying yourself or saying you're too perfect to your own good.
Yeah.
Mm.
I find it a horrible question to answer.
Mm.
Yeah, because no, I don't like it. Let's hope I never get asked it in an actual interview. Next one is another classic in terms of broader interviews. I don't see it either that I don't see it in law firm interview like question banks very often either. Where do you see yourself in 5 years and why? Ryan, would you like to kick us off?
I've never had this one before, surprisingly, but I did prepare for it.
Did
I
you
would,
not?
yeah. I think just in case it came up, because it is one of those really hard ones, and you do hear people having been asked it. Just not, I haven't heard anyone at a law firm being asked this actually, but in other jobs, and I feel like it could be a common one. Um, well, obviously, the simple answer is progress through this firm as an NQ, not move somewhere else, like as a lateral hire once you're qualified. You want to stay there. Maybe talk about any skills you wish you have developed during that time. But now, what I'd probably say is 5 years on from now, obviously, I'll be qualified. I'll be 3 years, 2 or 3 years qualified. I have to do my SQE and then 2 year training contract. So 2 years qualified.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would hope to have regular client contact and maybe starting to win over my own work, developing a network of kind of other professionals, like whether it or not it's just lawyers or like other people in professional service firms that I work with regularly, becoming more involved in the business development side of things, kind of learning how to, well, win work from clients and going to client events and stuff like that. Becoming more involved in activities at the firms, maybe like employee networks and getting involved at events and things like that. And building a reputation amongst colleagues and clients to being reliable, commercially minded, and being trusted to deliver exceptional work each time, I guess I'd say. But it's a very like It's a difficult question to answer that one.
That was a tick, 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 that's got everything that they could possibly want. No, I mean, I would also get really stumped. I think it's also fine to, um, if you get asked this question, well, obviously you have to think about yourself at this firm where you're
Mm,
interviewing, as Ryan says. If they've done like if they've got international secondments, you could say, I would have liked to have gone on an international
mm,
secondment, built my network at your offices abroad. I think what they want to see is that you have the potential to grow and grow organically at the firm and involve yourself in all of these aspects, as Ryan has mentioned, like not just sat at my desk and done my law job, because that's not really what they want anymore. It's ambition, intention, and seeing that you want the progression as much as they want the
yeah,
progression. Because even in this very lateral market, higher saturated legal sector, lots of law firms, what they ultimately want is to organically grow their own workforce that is born and bred, in their training programs, because that means that they understand how the firm works and how they work and their clients. So they want to see you getting involved in that trainee to partner pathway, as they say, ambition. I don't know. I feel like that there are probably other ways to answer that. You could say something mildly personal, but it is a law firm interview,
mm,
as we've said multiple times. Never get too comfortable, you know. Get relatively comfortable.
not
Um,
too.
yeah, we're getting into the slightly stranger ones. Uh, this one was submitted to us, and I think the person was referencing a specific sport.
It was
But
horse
it
riding.
was horse riding. What skills in chosen sport also apply to law? So if you've maybe talked about, if it's not a CV blind interview, like they have some of your work experience, and you said that you did a team sport or you did horse riding, like this person, how are you able to relate the skills that you've learned in that area of sport to law? I think this is actually quite simple. It just can be like, what am I supposed to say? I think if I had anything, I would have probably talked about ballet because that's what I did for a long time when I was younger. And there's so many that you could drop in. Discipline, you need to go every single practice to improve. It's not the kind of sport, I will call it a sport, it is a sport. It's not the kind of sport that you can improve in overnight. It requires immense attention to detail, bodily related, obviously, but it's very specific in the way that it wants certain things to, the positions that your feet should be in and where your hands should be are very, very specific. So you have to have very good attention to detail. Um, if you're going to be talking about a team sport, perhaps you play football when you were younger or whatnot in like a team, that's really obvious. You need to be able to work in a team and work towards a common goal. Maybe you were a captain, leadership, initiative. There are so many things you could talk about, and I think this one's quite common for all sorts of extracurricular activities that you might have on your CV. Maybe you were involved in your theatre group at university or something like that. And there's always stuff to talk about. And it's always relatable because I don't know, law isn't as scary as people think it is. There are loads and loads of skills that are very transferable. Um, Horse riding, I would have probably thought about commitment and discipline
Mm,
the
yeah,
most. And maybe if it seems like the kind of thing that really requires a lot of time management because you need to take care of
yeah.
your horse and get up at like ridiculous hours in the morning, go to the stables, clean them, and then I don't know
Yeah,
anything about horse riding. But I
I
would
don't
probably
either.
think time management is very important. You could probably knock time management into most extracurriculars because
Mm.
they're extracurricular. You got to manage your time to do them. Ryan, that was a rambly answer. What would you
I
do?
don't think so. I think that was good. I think it's a very algebraic question where you work backwards, where you think, oh, what does a law firm actually want to see? What skills do they want to see? So look on a law firm's website. It'll be leadership and collaboration, resilience, adaptability, communication, time management, motivation and commitment, emotional intelligence, initiative, commercial awareness, whatever they want to look for. It'll be all of those things. Then work backwards and think, okay, how have I actually demonstrated that from my sport? So you mentioned there, like with ballet, um, resilience and I guess motivation to get up at like to go to all your lessons at whatever time. It's a lot of commitment. I guess also as well, like if it's a ballet performance, there's lots of people there and it's got to be very, very, very coordinated. So you got to communicate with other people. There's so much you can say really. I think you can connect to any sport. Like even if someone said esports, which I'm not dogging on, esports is a sport for some people. You could be like, well, I manage my time effectively going to my esports club and then doing my studies as well. Or I was motivated and committed to get better. Sorry, I'm laughing, which means it seems like I'm not taking esports seriously. I do take that back. But you can draw parallels between any sport really and the skills you do, or in fact, any extracurricular, whether it's a sport or not, there'll always be something you can draw. And I think it also relates to people being scared that having no legal work experience means they won't get a job in law. I did countless jobs, like just normal retail jobs before I got a training contract. I worked at Tesco's, and I mean, and a call center, but with Tesco's, it's you work constantly with customers. I worked during COVID as well, so it's like knowing how to work with a team and make sure all these kind of COVID regulation things, related things are in place. Um, Communicating with people, you had to get like all the shelves stocked by 7 o'clock in the morning. If someone was running behind, you obviously go help them. And it's these things where it seems like, oh, this seems quite, I don't know, not as powerful or impactful in practice. I know one person who's done spoke for the United Nations or done youth parliament or something like that, and I've only worked at Tesco's. I think it when you put it in perspective though, if you've been able to hold like a full-time job where you can just draw skills from that, it is very impactful and very
Yeah.
powerful. It's just the way you talk about it. On to the next one, which I think this one's going to get a little bit deep for me, I guess. What is one person outside the legal world you look up to and why? Do you want to start and then if you've got one and then I can come to mine?
Yeah, I mean, this is my problem with this question is that I've got too many people that I'm thinking of, and a lot of them relate to like the arts. And my instinct with this question is that, oh, law firms are going to want to hear about, I don't know, some business person, which they might do that if that's the kind of thing that if that's the kind of person you organically look up to. But what they want to hear is that you're just able to consider what makes a person impressive and you're able to think about them in a sort of reflective manner. I think my person that I would have would choose like right now, because I've been rewatching this TV show called The Thick of It, would be Armando Iannucci, who wrote the script for that. He's like a really impressive guy. He's written some really, really cool political satire. He started out in radio, but the reason I found him so impressive, I was listening to an interview the other day, is that when he was writing The Thick of It, which is an incredibly famous and successful BBC drama now, like it rose to huge heights, they had like no budget, a bad camera. He had barely any experience in TV. Actually, I don't think he had worked in TV at all. But what he did have was like intelligence, commitment, and a really good team around him. And he just thought to himself, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it the way that I can. And I don't care that I don't have experience in it. I'm just going to put my best foot forward and as much effort as I can into it. And it clearly paid off. I mean, their budget grew like tenfold after the first series came out because it was so successful. And I was really inspired by that. And obviously I really liked the show. But I think the other person I'd probably choose was one of my history professors from university,
Mm.
mostly because he is one of the coolest teachers I've ever met. He's so committed to his work, but he's also very aware of the world around him. Professors at Cambridge, in particular, have a habit of being quite locked in on their subject and
Mm.
not able to talk about other things, especially in the context of like a lecture or a seminar. But he was very worldly. He was called Martin Rule. Shout out Martin. He was just able to talk about everything and anything with the most immense depth. And it was his curiosity that really spurned me on to do so many things with my life. I should email him, see how he's doing. But yeah, shout out Martin.
I'm
Oh my
sure I'd
God,
appreciate that.
feeling very nostalgic. But yeah, what about you, Ryan?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I think your answer is really good. I think it doesn't matter at all who you pick, just as long as you kind of have a reason for it and can speak. I think that's the part of the interview in general. Um, that you can just speak about something convincingly or cogently. I remember HSF Kramer, one of their application, actually just HSF at the time, one of their application questions last year was something along the lines of, tell me about anything in the world that interests you in under 250 words and
Love
why it
that.
interests you. Yeah, I spoke about etymology, which is completely random, but it's like something that I'm actually interested in. I know you're probably a bit interested in it too as a languages person, but I
Yes.
was just I just rattled on for like 250 words and I got through to interview at HSF, not HSF Kramer yet. Um, but I was like, is this the right way to be going? Because I'm not like I am interested in the commercial world, but not in the way that like it's a complete and utter passion, I guess. But I really like reading about etymology and I have loads of books on it. So once again, I just think it's something that's so random and out there, but they're just testing your ability to speak cogently and convincingly about it, even though it just doesn't seem very legally related, I guess. So I spoke about, well, what I would speak about now is Malala Yousafzai,
Oh,
who
Malala, yeah.
is, yeah, the Pakistani education activist. She won a Nobel Peace Prize at 17. Um, advocating for girls' education back in Pakistan, and the Taliban shot her in the head. I believe she was 15, walking back from school,
Yeah.
and ever since she's been very publicly vocal, obviously, about her. She's advocated for educational equality for girls all across the world. She's the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner ever. She pursued a dream and went on to go study PPE at Oxford. Spoke at the UN on her 16th birthday. That's twice I've mentioned the UN in this call. I think she's just quite inspiring. I mean, she's obviously a lot of resilience and tenacity there. That's an understatement. Never giving up on what she believed in, even after an assassination attempt. Like, spreads a message of positivity. I follow her on Instagram, and she's always putting things. She's just written a book. I haven't read the book, but she's always just putting very positive messages and funny things on Instagram that I see, and I think, oh, that's lovely. Um, and I think that positivity and kind of like resilience is quite inspiring. So that's, I guess, who I would say.
Oh, your answer's so good. What a lovely answer. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, you just have to be able to talk about people with a semblance of,
Mm,
coherence. As you say, like commercial, like I'm obviously interested in the commercial world, but I don't think I have that sort of idolatry tendency that some people do
mm.
about like certain CEOs. I'm interested in the work that some of them do, but I'm not ever going to be like, you are
We
my
also
God.
have a life outside of work.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're completely allowed to talk about other people outside of yeah, that sort of world. I think that's why they say outside of the legal world as well,
Mm,
so that you
yeah.
don't talk about some sort of judge or barrister, because you're supposed to be a multifaceted and interesting
Mm,
person, because that makes a great person to work with.
yeah.
Um, did we do what gets you out of bed in the morning? I know I was going to answer this one, wasn't I?
You
Uh,
can answer it.
this is a ridiculous question. Hate this. But what they're trying to do here, I think, once again, is just look for purpose and make sure that you are actually illustrating, you know, initiative in some way, and that you're actually thinking about your life deeply and not just coasting along. For me, I would probably say that I've always really enjoyed learning about all sorts of different things. I think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning is learning something new, learning some random things, learning things related to law, things that are outside of it, related to my degree, about what's going on in the world. My ambition in life is to never be bored, and the way to do that is by constantly learning. And I think that would, if I said it coherently enough, that would be a completely valid response. Manifests in reading, it manifests in listening to things and podcasts and talking to people. Um, my partner lives a very different life to me. He works in music, and so I learn something new every day with him. Some things I have absolutely no clue about, no expertise in whatsoever. So I think what they want to see here is that you're able to be curious and, show some sort of passion and zest for life. Yeah, I don't know. Ryan, I thought you didn't want to answer this question, did you? No.
I don't mind. No, it's I do just think it's trying to get out what motivates you and energizes you, and I agree with you a lot. It's just that I think that just pushing yourself, challenging yourself to do new things, constantly learning. That's what I ultimately want to do in my career, and that's why I want to go into commercial law. I feel like with the other jobs I've had in life, it's just I don't feel very satisfied. Like I know
Yeah,
some people do. Some people want to go work in retail. That is completely fine. Just for me, I personally like that element of learning something new every day, or kind of meeting or working with someone new every day, and kind of
yeah,
just pushing myself at work. Like it can be exhausting, but I also like that challenge of it. So if I could think of a better way to phrase that in an interview, in a way to be like, this is why I love commercial law, and kind of link it back to it. That's what I would answer.
yeah, yeah. That's a perfect answer. I was
The
gonna
last two are a bit silly.
The last
It's
two are
yeah.
really silly, but one of them was from one of our submissions. And to how, if you're
Mm.
listening to whoever this was, I'm really sorry. What type of tree would you be and why? I would probably sit there and just,
Stew.
yeah, take a long drink of water, you know, of the entire
Walk
jug.
out the door.
Yeah. I think I said we were talking about this yesterday that I would probably say something flippant about an oak tree.
Mm.
My instinct with these sorts of questions is to be funny or witty. I don't think that's necessarily
Mm,
good. I just can't believe that this is a real question.
mm.
Um, I think what I would probably actually say is a willow tree because I had one in my back garden as a child and it got struck by lightning and it got bent out of shape.
Oh wow.
But it didn't fall over. It's actually still standing. It was struck by lightning before we moved to that house and it's bent like this. So it started off like a regular tree and it is now, for those of you who are not watching this clip, because it probably won't be a clip, it's sort of a right angle. It's completely, Anyway, I'd probably turn it into some potted story about resilience and still standing. I don't know. If I were actually asked this question, I would probably then spin it back to them and be like, and what tree would you be? Give me a
I think that's
serious
fair.
response. A birch tree. Or maybe you could relate it to Minecraft for anyone who's playing
That
like
is true.
playing Minecraft. Yeah, what would you say?
I I think I would go with your first approach where I wouldn't know what to say, so I'd be like, let me try and be witty, so it kind of eases the awkwardness and not being able to answer. I think I said yesterday a coconut tree because if you invest in me, I will bear lots of fruit. As in, like, please take me on, please give me all your development and pay for my SQE and whatever else I need, and I will be very fruitful and bring in lots of work. I think that's fair. I don't know if being witty is the way to go. I don't know if I need a serious answer. I don't know what I'd say because I'm not. I'm gonna go for the word arborologist. Is that someone who studies trees? Arbor's like tree in French. I'm just sorry. I just
Yeah.
gotta have to look at this.
Yeah, actually, that.
It's just an arbor. Oh wait, no, arborologist or an arborist is a specialist focused on the healthcare and management of individuals, trees, shrubs, and woody plants. So either or.
Yeah,
I'm not
or
an arborist.
arboriculturalist or a
Uh,
dendrologist or
oh,
just a
I'm not.
forester, as in
I'm
a,
not
yeah.
an arboriculturalist. Was it?
Hmm.
I'm not one of
Regardless.
those. But from my limited knowledge of trees, I'd probably say like um I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think maybe like a redwood tree, like those American ones that are really really
Oh
tall and
yeah.
like stout because they never fall no matter what.
Nice. They stood the test
Mm.
of time. That would
Exactly.
work.
That's it.
Moving on. Because we're sort of to time. This final question is actually a bonus, and it's from an application question for a certain law firm. If you know, you know, because it was very distinct. It was from 2 years ago. And I answered this question. It's if your favorite childhood toy suddenly came to life, what advice would you give them? Now, I stood and stared at this question for weeks when I was trying to figure out how to respond to it, and my instinct was to be witty, so I'll just read out my answer as a bonus. My favourite toy was James from Thomas the Tank Engine. I would warn him to tread, brackets, trundle, exclamation mark, brackets, carefully. Steam engines aren't exactly trending these days, and he might need to embrace the electric revolution. With that bright red paint, he does bear a passing resemblance to a London bus. Whether that's a compliment or an insult is his prerogative. I got through to the next round, but what I would like to say is that that was the most ridiculous application question I've ever come across. And that firm has a tendency of having ridiculous questions every single year without
I I think I would have put you through for the use of the word trundle. That is a fantastic word.
with the exclamation mark included. So
I don't know
stupid.
who James is, to be honest.
The red one.
I can't say I used to watch Thomas the Tank Engine, but I know I only know Thomas from the pictures, but I didn't know there was like a cast full of tank engines. I just kind of thought it would be Thomas on his own
No, there's
adventures.
so
But
many. There's so many tank engines. James was the red one, and he had a bit of an anger management problem. He
oh,
was
is it on like iPlayer? I might have to start watching it.
Yeah, he was a diva for real. Okay. With that in mind, what we wanted to bring home today in this episode was that some of these questions are entirely ridiculous and you won't come across them. But there is the slightest chance that you will be hit with a curveball like this and you'll just have to deal with it. What you really should just do is breathe, remain calm. If they've hit you with a curveball, they're in full knowledge that it's a ridiculous question and they won't expect a polished answer. Have your basics prepped, know the firm, know yourself, obviously, but just breathe and you'll be completely fine. And I even said I don't know in my law firm interview, and I've got a vac scheme now. So you'll be fine. They're not expecting perfection. They're expecting interesting and deep thinking people. Any final words of advice, Ryan?
I think just utilize the water trick as much as you can. Take a second to think and gather your thoughts, and just before you speak, just do not spiel everything out at once because that will lead to a much less coherent response. I just say ask questions, ask them to repeat themselves if you feel comfortable. I don't think it's like fatal to an interview at all. It just shows you're actually engaged and are listening. And best of luck. There's still quite a few training contract applications and vacation scheme deadlines open. You can check them out on the Legal Cheat Key deadlines calendar. Have a look at that. And yeah, I hope everyone's interviews go fantastically. And hopefully you don't get any of these questions.
Yeah, hopefully. Good luck, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.